Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome into the latest YouTube video. As you know, it's Thursday morning, so I'm going to give you guys my top starts and sits for Week 11 of the NFL season. I know I say it every week, but this whole season's flying by. I can't believe it's already Thanksgiving. We're seeing all the Christmas decorations getting put up over the last week or so. But yeah, you guys are here for not my Christmas decoration advice or anything like that. You are here for my fantasy advice. So why don't I just go ahead and dive right into today's video? Most of you probably do know the drill at this point, but I always like to welcome in anytime potential first time listeners. You're going to get my top two starts and sits for the quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end position. So, as always, I start with the quarterbacks because it's the most important position in football. And my top start of the week is going to be Daniel Jones against the Lions. The Lions are the worst defense right now as far as in terms of fantasy against quarterbacks, and they are actually one of the worst defenses in the NFL. But when you look at fantasy, they're giving up 23 points a game to quarterbacks this year. And then they're also not that great on the ground. And what do we love about Daniel Jones anytime you want a streaming quarterback is like, hey, can you at least give me a good rushing floor? Daniel Jones offers that. So it's going to be a great opportunity for him not to only get those rushing yards against a bad rushing defense, but that defense is pretty rough against covering wide receivers and just as a whole in their secondary. So you could see him actually having one of his higher passing yard games of the season, which isn't going to take much for Daniel Jones. So if you're looking for a streaming quarterback this week, I think Daniel Jones is your top option entering Week 11. My other start, I can't believe I'm actually going to talk about this name because he was my second-ranked fantasy quarterback entering the season. This year has not gone well for the well. They're 5-4, but it's not as gone as expected for those Chargers, and it hasn't helped that he's been missing Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. Well, positive news: we don't know if they're going to play or not, but Mike Williams and Keenan Allen did return to practice. Now, it should be notable those two guys were only doing individual drills today. So we'll have to see if they do any like team reps over the next 2 days. But even if just one of them can make it back on Sunday, I think that's going to help out Justin Herbert. And then when you look at as far as the defense they're going against in Kansas City, they're giving up 19.6 points per game. That's the fourth most allowed in the NFL. Now, these two teams did face earlier this year, back in September, and when the Chiefs and Chargers played that game, Justin ended up finishing with 334 yards, 3 touchdowns, and interception in that game. So he already put up a huge game before when he faced this defense. If he gets those two top wide receivers back in the lineup, which he did have in that previous game, I think he had Keenan Allen. I don't know. Keenan Allen's been dealing with this hamstring for a while. I am not sure when. I know he's been missed a lot of games. I'm not sure. I can't remember when he officially left the lineup. But yeah, with that being said, though, I think Justin's going to have a bounce back performance after this past week facing a greater defense in San Francisco, and I think he's going to have one of his ceiling performances for you this week. My top sits. I'm going with Derek Carr against the Broncos, and you know what? If Derek Carr, he's the matchup says he's not going to have a good matchup, right? Going against the Broncos defense is one of the better defenses in the league. They're only giving up 10.4 points per game to quarterbacks. That's the second fewest in the amount in the NFL. And then their defense, they can do it. I thought the Colts would double team Devontae. I don't know if you can stop Devontae Adams, to be quite honest, but they do have like a Patrick Surtain, who's one of the better young quarterbacks in the league. They can try to stick on him and get him in man-to-man coverage. Now he's going to have a lot of testing to do that. He's going to have a long night of dealing with that coverage, or day, I should say. But yeah, anyways, with that being said, they got a good cornerback that can follow and shadow Devontae Adams, and there's just not that a lot of passing options for Derek Carr going forward. And I'm at this point where I don't even know if I should be talking about him as a sit. I wonder if he's no longer worthy of a streaming quarterback. He's been one of those guys in the past. You would think like, oh, if the matchup's right, Derek Carr, you could stream him. What's a crazy stat I saw earlier today? The last time that Derek Carr threw 3 touchdowns in a game was back in 2020. That's wild. And then like the stat when that stat was presented, there was like 7 or 8 quarterbacks that they listed that has thrown 3 touchdowns, and it's like Trevor Siemian, Mitch Trubisky, like C.J. Beathard was on the list. Like that's how long it's been since he has thrown 3 touchdowns in a game. So if he can't overcome this matchup, he's officially like off even the streaming radar for me going forward. Since it's been that long since he's had a ceiling type of performance in fantasy. My other sit, a big Kirko Chains against the Cowboys. I definitely want to give him some kudos as far as how he finished that game after kind of having that rough start against the Bills, but that he was able to will his team to victory. Well, there were some things that bounced their way, but he still got the job done against the Buffalo Bills in that insane game. But with that being said, they are going against the Dallas Cowboys this week. The Cowboys are only giving up 13.6 points per game to quarterbacks. That's the 7th fewest in the NFL. And man, I'm rooting for the Vikings. I got friends that are Vikings fans. I like a lot of players on the Vikings. I would like to see them go on a Super Bowl run, but it feels like they're such on a good streak, right, that something's going to fall underneath them at some point, right? I thought it was going to happen against the Bills last week. It kind of did for about, 2.5 quarters. But they ended up like pulling through at the end. Kirk got I think he only got like 1 or 2 touchdowns still. But with that being said, I just kind of I just see with the Cowboys losing against the Packers, they're really going to come to play against the Vikings in my opinion. So that's why I would look to avoid Kirk Cousins, and the numbers say it in fantasy. So again, my top starts: Daniel Jones against the Lions, Justin Herbert against the Chiefs, and my sits: Derek Carr against the Broncos and Kirk Cousins against the Cowboys. Moving into my top starts and sits for the running back position. I'm going to go with the pair of running backs up over there in Washington, Brian Robinson Jr. and Antonio Gibson. I think both of those guys are set to have a huge opportunity against Houston to hit their ceiling games. If you guys haven't known by now, Texas have they have the worst rushing defense in the NFL. They're actually giving up 28 points a game. So you could even see both these guys get to 14 plus points for you, even though it's a split backfield. So you're looking at, and also like not last night, but 2 nights ago against the Eagles, what they ran the ball like 40 or 50 times, it seemed like, even though they're only averaging like 4 point whatever yards a carry. I think it was actually less than that. So they're not afraid to hammer the rushing attack against a good defense. What do you think they're going to do when they play a terrible rushing defense where they find success? They're just going to hammer the ball up the middle with Brian Robertson Jr., and then Antonio Gibson can do his things with his electricity with his legs. My other top stars, I'm going with Isaiah Pacheco and Jerick McKinnon. If you want to maybe roll the dice on Clyde Edwards-Helaire, that's your call. But it's over the last couple of weeks, it's been Isaiah Pacheco's and Jerick McKinnon's backfield there in Kansas City. They are going against the Chargers, who are allowing 25.1 points per game. That is the second most in the NFL. I feel like this Chargers-Chiefs game has the potential to be a huge shootout type of matchup where a lot of points are scored. So that's going to give a lot of opportunities for Pacheco and McKinnon to find the end zone. So if you got one of those guys, I think this is definitely the week that I would look to put them in my lineup. My top sits, I am going to go with James Conner against the 49ers, strictly because 49ers have one of the best defenses in the NFL. And when you look at it in terms of fantasy, they're only giving up 12 points a game. That's the fewest amount across the league. And then we really don't know what's going on with this quarterback situation. Kyler Murray's technically day-to-day. I did see that Colt McCoy is actually dealing with an injury himself. So that gives you questions surrounding what is this offense going to be like next Monday night. So with that being said, we don't know who's going to be running the show for the Cardinals offense. And then when you look at the matchup, it says don't play running backs against San Francisco. So if you have James Conner, I would look to leave him out of my lineups this week. My other sits: Michael Carter and James Robinson against the Patriots. The Patriots, their defense is underneath Bill Belichick. They're always going to be good against the run. Pretty simple. And when it even backs up in the fantasy world where they're only giving up 13.4 points per game to running backs this year, that is the second fewest amount in the NFL. I know Michael Carter and James Robinson had a good outing the last time we did see them prior to the bye week. But you got the Patriots coming off a bye. I'm always going to trust that Bill Belichick's going to have everything dialed up and tuned in for his defense to stuff the run and basically try to force Zach Wilson to beat them in that matchup. So with that being said, my top starts: Brian Robinson Jr. and Antonio Gibson against the Texans, Isaiah Pacheco and Jerick McKinnon against the Chargers, and my sits: James Conner against the 49ers, and then Michael Carter and James Robinson against the Patriots. Moving into my top starts and sits for wide receivers. My top starts is going to be T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd against the Steelers. It's not. It doesn't sound like this will be the week that Jamar Chase is going to return. I think they're shooting for next week for him to be back in the lineup. So that's going to give a great opportunity of volume for T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd as a sneaky play this week, where you can get a ceiling type of performance out of Boyd. I mean, T. Higgins is going to produce even with Jamar's in there. That's when Tyler Boyd kind of takes his step back. Chase is out. Boyd gets more of an opportunity, and then when you look at the defense they're facing, not the greatest defense in the world, and when you look at what they're doing as far as against wide receivers in fantasy, they are giving up 29.3 points per game. That's the most allowed in the NFL. That secondary right now is missing Minkah Fitzpatrick, so their best player and their secondary is not going to be in this game. You know who's going to take advantage of that? Joe Burrow. So I see a high ceiling where Joe's getting close to like 300 yards, 2 or 3 touchdowns, and I can see T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd finishing that matchup with each of them having a score by the end of it. My other start, now might be some names you don't want to trust because as great as Justin Fields has been, it hasn't been like a fireworks through the air. Most of it's been on the ground for the Chicago Bears offense. But I think this week, Darnell Mooney and Chase Claypool are going to be some good sneaky plays in fantasy. First of all, it's the matchup. They're going against the Atlanta Falcons, who are allowing 28.6 points per game. That's the second most in the NFL. And then we got to start looking at who might not play in this game. First of all, Khalil Herbert was put on IR yesterday, so he's out for the next 4 weeks. We'll have to see about David Montgomery. He missed practice, but it said it was a personal reason, so I'm assuming David Montgomery will be back. Not that he really affects the passing attack, but if he's not out there and Herbert's not out there, then they're going to have to get like Mooney and Claypool involved a lot. And then their tight end, Cole Kmet, he missed practice today because of an injury. So Cole Kmet cannot play. That's one less person to take the targets in that passing attack. So I see a lot of funneled opportunities for both of them. This is going to be the third game for Claypool in the system. They should start getting him more involved, in my opinion. And I think we're going to start seeing that. He should be acclimated. He should at least have a certain, by now they should have at least 3 to 5 plays they can dial up that gets the ball in his hands. And I think we're going to see that type of explosion out of the passing attack from Justin Fields and those wide receivers this week. Moving into my sits. Now, you guys have heard me say this every week. You're not going to sit either three of the. Well, maybe a Devontae Smith. It depends on how many wide receivers you have. I do have some options in the leagues that I do. I have some shares of him in. But yeah, really quick though. Most of these 3 names in redraft leagues, dynasty leagues, these are names you're going to play. So I always say temper your expectations. But if you play as I always say, you play daily fantasy football and FanDuel, DraftKings, Underdog, wherever you do play. These are names I would look to avoid this week. First of all, starting with my first top sits, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith against the Colts. The Colts are only giving up 14.4 points per game to wide receivers this year, and that's the second fewest amount in the NFL. They got Stephon Gilmore. They got a nice pair of safeties in the back, and they just don't. The thing with the Colts defense, they don't allow a lot of explosive plays. It's very minimal. They allow explosive plays through the air, and then when you got Gilly Lock that can lock on a A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith at any point in the matchup, help shut them down. So again, you're going to probably play these guys, but if they don't have the greatest outcome in the matchup, it's just because it wasn't there for you. My other name, Amon-Ra St. Brown against the Giants. Again, you're going to play Amon-Ra St. Brown because he's going to get the volume of opportunity, but don't be surprised if he doesn't get you a high ceiling type of game and he gets more of your floor. The Giants right now are only giving up 17.4 points per game. That is the third fewest in the NFL. So yeah, the Giants I think it's mainly because they just play really good defense. They're very disciplined. They're very coached up on that side of the ball, and I think they're like the Colts too, where they might not be like the greatest defense in the world, but they just don't allow a lot of explosive plays to happen against them, which minimizes the opportunity for these guys, these wide receivers, to hit their ceilings when they face these defenses. So again, my top starts: T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd against the Steelers. And then Darnell Mooney and Chase Claypool against the Falcons. My sits, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith against the Colts. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown against the Giants. Moving into my top starts and sits for the tight end position. Surprise, guys, I am not talking about a tight end to play against the Cardinals. Now, I will say this. George Kittle's playing against the Cardinals. You're going to play him. I thought I could just, it kind of just like, could have been a chalk pick for me to tell you guys to play George Kittle. But George Kittle and Kyle Pitts, they're just the two tight ends where they're not giving you the weeks you should be getting out of them. But you also can't bench them because they have every at any given week they can hit their ceiling, right? So I'm not going to tell you to play an obvious start at the tight end position, but if you are looking for some guys to potentially stream, one guy that's probably going to be out there on the market would be Greg Dulcich against the Raiders. The Broncos rookie tight end has continued to be involved in this Denver offense, even though it's not the most exciting thing in the world right now. But when you look at the matchup against the Raiders are giving up 9.8 points per game to tight ends. That is the fourth most allowed in the NFL. And then it came out today that KJ Hamler is going to be out for some weeks. Jerry Jeudy hurt his ankle. He did not practice today. We'll have to see if he's going to play. So if those two names are out, it's just Courtland Sutton and Greg Dulcich. So not only the matchup's great for him, but he's going to get a high volume of opportunity this week. My other start, I am going to go with Dalton Schultz against the Vikings. The Vikings are allowing 8.8 points per game to the tight ends. That's the seventh most in the NFL. Just strictly because he's got a set role in that offense. And like I said earlier, I just think this Cowboys team is going to really come out to play against Minnesota this weekend. And I could see them that offense getting back on track and Dak having a really good performance on Sunday. And then you want to take advantage of that, which means you could definitely see maybe a Schultz get in the end zone for you. My top sits. I'm going to go with Tyler Higbee against the Saints. Even though he ended up being a good streaming option for you last week, this is not the week to look to stream him at all, even with the likelihood of Matthew Stafford coming back into the lineup. The Saints are only giving up 4 points a game to tight ends. That is the fewest amount in the NFL. If you were thinking about sticking with him as a streaming tight end, I would rather drop him and go pick up a Greg Dulcich if you can. My other sit, I am going to go with TJ Hawkinson against the Cowboys. Now, again, Hawkinson, I don't really put him up in the tier of like a Kyle Pitts and a George Kittle, but he's still a tight end in fantasy where you're probably going to play him. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not dropping TJ Hawkinson for anybody. I'm just going to have to roll the dice on him in these matchups. So in DFS, I'm not going to play him. He's a tempered my expectation play this week. He is going against the Cowboys defense. Again, I don't have to rehash everything on how I think the Cowboys are going to come to play this weekend. But with that being said, when you look at fantasy, they're only giving up 4.3 points per game to tight ends. That's tied for the second fewest in the NFL. So again, mainly it's like a temper your expectations play with the Hawkinson. But as far as DFS, I would look to avoid him this week. So again, my top starts, Greg Dulcich against the Raiders and Dalton Schultz against the Vikings. My sits, Tyler Higbee against the Saints and TJ Hawkinson against the Cowboys. So as always, guys, I want to thank you for tuning in to today's video. I always appreciate anytime anybody throws my content on. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, please hit the subscribe button. I want to see that start getting that number back up again. And then, as always, go tell a friend about me. And if you guys have any questions, if there is any names I did not talk about you want to hear my opinion on, get in my comment section. I'll return any comments that I do get. If you have my social medias at Cody Talks NFL, you can slide into a DM and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. And as I always say, if you're a friend that's got my number, you can always hit me up through text. You can try to call me. Can't guarantee I'm going to answer. But with that being said, you can always reach out for my fantasy advice. Other than that, you guys will see me back for next week. It's week 12. It's Thanksgiving week. I can't believe it's here. I'm out of here. You guys enjoy your weekend. I hope you guys win your matchups. Let's go lock these fantasy football playoffs up. Peace out, guys.